first time I started thinking about it was when I started reading about it in the paper, and when I started looking into it. And I went down to that. I was invited to go down to that Balkan protest, which I went down to, and quite a few of my mates and I don't know. We went down and we started to look at what it really meant, and you got great big trucks driving down into this beautiful ancient woodland and pumping hydrochloric acid into the ground, and all these kind of people that are just from the local village, and the kind of media control about it. And then you start looking into what the government says about it, and then looking at what they're saying and actually taking what they're saying and investigating a bit more, and then you start to open your eyes and discover that you've been lied to, and there's huge questions that remain outstanding. We're having this thing rushed through on us. This is a 20-year project, right? Fracking is not going to mature for 20 years, right? That means, pipelines, infrastructure, roads, tunnels, whatever, to get this stuff moved, to make any impression whatsoever on a gas market. In 20 years' time, if we carry on what we're doing, talk to people in bloody Somerset up to their ankles in water. Do you know what I mean? I mean, climate chaos is already upon us. This is not just a step in the wrong direction. It's a giant leap into the dark. It's completely mad, and we need to talk about it, and people need to be informed about it. The biggest problem, according to the latest polls, 48% of people in this country don't have a view one way or the other. But the government's rushing it through, and this is the legacy we're leaving to future generations and our children and everything. And I just think it's the most important thing facing us, and we've got to do something about it. We've got to stop it now, and we've got to talk about it. People need to be informed. Once they're properly informed, then they can make a decision about what they think the right thing to do is. And at the minute, what we're getting is total misinformation from the government, bad science, basically energy companies kind of telling the government what the deal is, and we've got to inform ourselves, and we've got to talk about it, and that's what we're doing tonight. We're trying to launch an initiative for that to happen. Me personally, I'm involved in lots of different actions, lots of different activities about trying to give ourselves a more justice in the world, and more respect for where we are, and to create a planet for future generations that people actually want to live in, and are able to live in, because the climate hasn't gone mad. And these are massive, important issues for us. It's funny today for me because, for the first time in years of energy companies infiltrating governments around the world and bribing them and corrupting them to kind of be on their side, and to stymie efforts by the international community to come to a consensus on climate change. And finally, about 6 months ago, the Intergovernmental panel on climate change reached a consensus, and they all agreed, all the best scientists in the world agreed, that climate change is a man-made phenomenon. The consequences of it are dire for the future, and climate chaos in the present. And I don't know what the argument is anymore. If people want to argue with the scientists, go and be a scientist, study it, go and argue it. But you've got people that don't have that information, don't look at that information, and want to argue for it. And that doesn't make any sense. We're talking about our children, we're talking about our future, we're talking about life as we know it on the planet, and we have to change. People have to accept ultimately the idea that they have to use less, and we have to be careful with the resources that we have left. And this is just a huge leap into the abyss, really, without any kind of public debate. Any kind of debate that we've had so far has been completely controlled by interests within the oil and gas industry, who've basically bought the fucking government. So, we as people need to either decide whether we feel this is worth fighting for or not. And if you feel that actually the earth and the future of your children is worth fighting for, you better inform yourself, and you better start getting involved. because the government's not going to do it for you. The government's already declared their position, and they're on the side of the oil and gas industry.
I thought that fracking was injecting stuff underneath the surface that we're walking on and blowing it away in order to get at residual bits of oil. Is that right?
Well, in a way it's right.
Basically, what is it?
Fracking is a result of the fact that traditional oil wells, where you just have a well of a substance underground and you put a pipe down and suck it out, those types of wells are drying up because we're using it all. We're not using it all to the extent where, how should I say this? You're not using it all to the extent that if we used it all, we'd be all right, because we've already agreed under the Kyoto Agreement and all the scientific evidence that we have to reduce climate change and we have to reduce emissions, we have to reduce carbon into the atmosphere, right? So the fact is, if we used all the existing oil fields in the North Sea, for example, in terms of the UK, if we used everything that was there that we can already get at, we would already go 50% way beyond the limits that we've already set ourselves. Right? So there is no kind of energy gap. There is no. This is a falsehood by the government. There's no kind of gap where you need to have fracking. The only reason we need fracking is energy companies wanting to make money out of it. You just look at what they've done in the United States. They have destroyed them in the state. New York State has banned it. France has banned it. Germany's banned it. Why are we not banning it? Why are we just going ahead with it? Why do you think a whole nation, why do you think New York State has banned it? It's so safe and so good for everything. Why would they ban it? Because it has serious side effects, and some of those side effects in terms of medical and health issues are, called all the chemicals that they put down in order to. Sorry, let me explain. When they drill the well, they're drilling very deep, right beneath the bedrock, right, going right through all the aquifers, right, really deep, going right through the rock, normal? And then they get to very much deeper than normal, right. And what they do is they put all these kind of fluids down with it. This kind of what they call produced water, PR term, produced water. It's actually radioactive chemicals, hydrochloric acid, benzene, whatever, right, mixed with water, right, and they put it down. It's called produced water, nice water, right, and they put it down, and they need all those kind of chemicals to stop the drill from rusting and to keep it, oiled and be able to take this stuff out. And once they've drilled down a certain point to a certain depth and they found the gas, what they can then do is they can drill out horizontally. And they can drill out horizontally from that well for about 2 or 3 miles in any direction, right underneath your house, right under your farmland, wherever they want. And you don't know because you don't have any rights to know, right? What they then do, in order to stimulate the gas or stimulate the oil that they're drilling for, they put down explosives, right? And they put down this produced water at super high pressure that fractures the rock layer, and that's why it's called fracking, because it fractures the rocks, and within the solution of this produced water they've got sometimes depleted uranium grains, and they've got, because they're extremely hard, and sometimes sand or whatever, and that goes into these cracks that they explode through this high pressure chemicals that they're putting down, and the little grains kind of keep the cracks open so that the gas can escape.
And then what, do they suck it out?
And then they suck it out. And then what they do, they can do that about 8 times for each well. They can do that about 8 times for each well. And then what they do is they put a bit of concrete on the top of it, right? They fill the end of it with concrete, and they move 2 miles down the road and they do it again, right? And at the moment in the United States, they are, you just see, by the way, a load of the water comes back out, right? Because they've got to get it out of the well in order to get the gas out. So they leave a load of it down there. They take a load of it out. The stuff they take out, they normally dig a big pit, right? Line it with plastic and leave it there to evaporate. No, on the surface, right? On the surface. So they leave that big pit so it evaporates into the atmosphere. Now in America, the chemicals used, and from that evaporation, have already been proved to cause birth defects, cancer, all kinds of stuff, right? And the government is saying that this is safe, so you start to look at it and you realise the scale of the lies that we've been told, that's when people start to get angry about it, and combine that with the idea of what's going on with climate change as a whole. And as I said, look at the people standing up to their knees in water in Somerset Levels, and they're fully aware of what climate change means, climate chaos as they call it. And this, as I said, this fracking industry, it's not like you can do a bit of it. It only works if you do it en masse, right? The economics of making that industry, the government's talking about it's going to reduce your energy bills. So it's like in 20 years' time from now, going to reduce our energy bills because it's going to take that long to actually get it up and running. You've got to invest in all the infrastructure and make that commitment now, right? In 20 years' time, if we're going in the same direction we are now in terms of like climate warming, it's insanity, right? It just doesn't make any sense.
And what about the climate warming with the chemicals that are evaporating?
Well, I don't know about the science on that part. I just know that it goes into the air and people breathe it in, and it seeps into the water table and it seeps into the aquifers and it poisons the water. That's why the guy here he's a staunch Tory. He's just brewed this beer because he's a brewer from Ramsgate or whatever, from Kent, and he's realising they're fracking next to him. He takes all his spring water for his beer brewery from this aquifer. They're going, and his things are totally at risk, and he's now, staunch Tory for life, started looking at what the government's saying, looking at the facts, and he's gone nuts, and it's like that's, and this is what's happening because the Conservative government are actually, most of these shale gas areas are right underneath Tory heartland. Right, they're right underneath the Sussex and Surrey and Kent.
Who owns that bit underneath?
The government would make a law say they own.
Doesn't the Queen own it?
Well, if she does, she belongs to the government because they've already licensed 2/3 of the English landmass, not the UK, the English landmass, for exploratory drilling for these oil wells. It's already been licensed by the government.
2/3.
And now the government is what they're rushing through now in legislation. Is they're changing the law so that local people will not be able to object through planning consent to any oil wells that are being put near their line. There will be no legal grounds for objection.
Oh, that's terrible. Okay,
so that's the kind of thing that's going on, and that's why we need to talk about it, and that's why people need to inform themselves about it.
What's the timescale for that legislation that you discussed?
It's imminent. It's imminent.
Like really soon?
Yeah.
So people need to know about it quickly, don't they?
People need to know about this whole issue very quickly.
Because if the people have got no right to protest, because the protests can be really effective, don't you think? There have been lots of situations where people protesting...
I think it's really important, and I think it has been effective in many ways and in many instances, but I do think that we've reached the stage today where traditional activism and to a degree all the kind of support from the usual suspects of the NGOs, whether it's Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth or whatever, I think it's hit a kind of glass ceiling. I think through media kind of manipulation and for lots of other reasons, many of them to do with the attitudes of the people within some of those organisations or within some of that activism, I think the public has really switched off to it, and I don't think it's as effective now today as it perhaps once was. And I think we need to find new ways of reaching people that are going to be affected by this issue, and to inform themselves. As I said before, 48% of the country don't have a view one way or the other because they're not informed about it. And before you know it, this will... If we don't stop this, you can forget everything else, because climate change will happen, the country will be polluted, people will get sick. It's so cynical when you think about the government is now, David Cameron had to come out and say, yeah, but don't you understand, it's only going to be the size of a cricket pitch, and we're going, and if these wells at full capacity are working properly, that could mean as much as £10 million that we could give to the local community. It'd be all good for everybody, wouldn't it? You don't go. It doesn't say, well, actually, where they've tried it so far and where it exists so far in the rest of the world, all the property prices have completely collapsed, right? Because nobody wants to live next door to a toxic dump. On the insurance side of things, the insurance industry will not insure your property for damage. It's happened up in Blackpool. All their bloody chimney pots fell off, and the guy's wall in his house was all full of cracks, and because it causes earthquakes under the ground, right? And it shakes your house. So the insurance company won't insure your house. So that means it's unmortgageable, right? You can't sell it because no one can get a mortgage on it. You can't get a mortgage on it. You know all your life savings, your whole thing. This is what's going to happen under Tory heartland, and it's incredible that they think they can get away with it. Really, you know. So in many ways, this issue is the best opportunity we have had in a long time to really put these people in their place and kind of get a different thing going. And stop having governments run by public schoolboys, you know, and actually get a fairer thing going. We have to stop it. You know, I'm determined, and that's what I think.
The reason that we're here today, and me personally, is because I'm scared of fracking. Because I don't know much about it, but I'm scared of it. Because now I feel even more scared because you've explained it.
Nice to see you, man.
You're right. Well, there's a hell of a lot of information about it, and there's a hell of a lot of misinformation about it, and you need to kind of trawl through it and decipher out what you think is right.